What is our identity in this universe according to the final revelation? What is Fermi paradox? No, I think there is a series on this. General relativity is the very famous theory presented by the Einstein, the world famous scientist.
Yes.
And it opens a new gate for a problem called three-body problem. There is a show on Netflix on this. And do you think does our final revelation with the Quran has something about this to say?
Every few years, you will have what is the next best alien movie.
In this, I have second question. So, what does what does final revelation tell us about the aliens? Sure, what do you think about that? Do aliens really exist or not?
Yes. You want the short answer? 100% Kebu. Okay. What is the probability that there should be life on a particular planet, essentially? Every story in the Quran happened on the earth. Let's accept that, especially involving people, because people are only on earth. There are no aliens. Let's make that assumption, right? There are no aliens. All the stories involving people must be happening on earth. So now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is describing some place, right, where again Zulkarnain went and it was on earth. Okay. Until when he reached the setting place of the sun. Now you tell me which place on the earth you're going to point out by saying, hey, you want to meet at 4 p.m? Let's meet where the sun rises or where the sun sets.
So, do you have any explanation about neutrinos, which is mentioned in the Quran, and what is neutrinos according to the modern science? Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to the Cosmos and the final revelation. Instead of trying to prove the Quran with the science, we are here to flip the script. We will prove science through the lens of the Holy Quran. We will implement our inclination toward Allah's creation. And yes, Shadman with us. Shadman, can you please introduce yourself to the audience?
Sure. Assalamu alaikum. My name is Shadman Quaiser. I do a lot of different things. I am an AI engineer. I teach physics and AI at Siraverse Academia. I have been interested in a lot of different questions pertaining to science, the cosmos, physics, and so on around the universe. And today we'll be diving deep into the cosmos. Let's see how it goes.
Okay, so I have few questions for you, Shadman, and I am beginning my questions with this one. So, what is our identity in this universe according to the final revelation?
Absolutely. To answer this question, let me answer, inshallah, in 2 words first, right? The very short answer is, we are Khalifatul Ard. What does that mean?
Well, I was going to ask this question.
Absolutely. Khalifatul Ard means the Khalifa of Earth. Khalifa means successor. Also means someone who's the caretaker. Also means someone who inherits something. So of course, it means that you have it is something over, if you are a Khalifa over something, that means your job is to inherit it. You got it from someone else. That's the fundamental thing. And the other thing is your job is to take care of it according to the best of your abilities. Khalifatul Ard, the Ard part here, which is a very, very important concept to understand. Because we have to always try to take the most universal meaning applicable for a Quranic verse or for a Quranic term, right? And so the idea is Ard here means all of the lands. Oftentimes in some of these English translations, you will see the heavens and the earth. The as-samawati wal ard translated as the heavens and the earth. And every time I see that, I have this face palm moment, It's just, how can you translate it like that? Because that is such a small thinking. We know there is billions and billions of galaxies out there, and they are all earth. There is earth everywhere. It's all of the lands. So this is not just talking about the earth.
So one land.
Yes, because on the other side is Samawati, and everyone translates that as the 7 heavens. So, well, if there are 7 heavens, then on the flip side, there should be 7 lands. So what do you mean by land? These are not individual planets. This means that on each heaven, there is all of the lands that is there in that heaven. That's the earth for that Sama. And as-samawati wal ard, we are Khalifatul Ard. We are not flying beings, right? We don't have the ability to just move around in the samawat, but we do have the ability to walk around on earth. So we are Khalifatul Ard in the very short sense, right? But let me go a little bit deeper, inshallah, so that people can appreciate that a little bit more. And here it's a bit of a more intellectual sided argument, right? And so for this, I'll go to Surah Al-Baqarah. Okay. In Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 30 to 33, Allah says, that when your Lord said to the angels, indeed, I will make upon earth a successive authority. Jaisa maine kaha, Khalifatul Earth. This is a successive authority. They said, be. So at that time, the angels, they are asking God, right? Will you place upon it one who causes corruption and therein sheds blood? Are you going to put someone who's going to cause a lot of trouble? And there's a very good reason for the angels actually asking this question, right? For those who know, before the humans were here on earth, there were only jinns on earth, and they started doing a lot of corruption, a lot of killing, a lot of worshipping other than Allah and all of that, right? And so in that situation, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent the angels to the earth to set them straight. And in fact, Iblis was part of that, right? He also came along to set this thing straight. And so after that, once the angels had already seen what a free thinking species on some earth can do, that's when the angels were like, is this going to be episode 2? Essentially, like, and why? Right? And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, indeed, you know not that which I know, or I know that which you do not know. Now, this might sound like almost like an answer that a mom gives to a 3-year-old when she doesn't really want to answer. To some people, it can sound like that. And to give you an example, the child comes and says, Mommy, why can't I get this candy? And mom just says, I know better than you. A lot of the times, the child is not going to be satisfied with their answer, right? And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not finish the answer there, in fact. Although that is very much the true answer. The truth of the matter is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows better. And so in the very first place, you should not be questioning it at all. Anyways, let's go further into his explanation. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says that he taught Adam the names of taught Adam the names, all of them. Or you can say he taught Adam the names of all things, right? And he showed those things now to the angels. And he asked them, what are the names of all these things? And essentially, I'm now paraphrasing from here. The angels said, exalted are you, we don't have any knowledge of these things. We don't know the names of these things. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put the same things in front of Adam alayhi salam, and of course, he was able to name all the things. And Allah already says that he taught Adam the names of all things. But what I want you to really think about here is what do we mean by knowing the names of all things, really, right? Because, for instance, humans all the time, they come across many different things that they don't really know the name of, so to say, right? In fact, if you think about it, there's a lot of things that we have invented today that undoubtedly Adam alayhi salam would not have seen, technically speaking, right? So in that sense, he would not know the name, for example, of what artificial intelligence is or what a robotic dog is in that sense. But what is it still? But if Adam alayhi salam was here today and he saw a robotic dog or he saw an artificial intelligence, he saw something, anything, he would recognize it at the very least. By not recognize what it does and so on, but recognize it as a thing. This is something that is very, very, something that we keep taking for granted as humans all the time on an intellectual level. We don't, I think one thing I would say here is humans are too stupid to understand how smart they are. Okay, this is a fundamental thing I've also learned when learning AI and learning about AI and developing these systems, right? Which is that humans often underestimate how hard it is to replicate human intelligence, right? And so the basic idea, coming to the main point again, is knowing the names of things is to be able to name something. You can name something anything, and then as long as you're consistent, that name will stick, and that's the name of the thing now, right? But the point is, if you cannot recognize, if you cannot differentiate between this is one thing and this is another thing, right? So for example, you see a big machine moving, you as a human can immediately tell this is one part of it, this is another part of it, this is another part of it, and they're working in this way together. If you don't recognize the individual things, you cannot name them. If you cannot name them, you cannot understand the system either. And by the way, there is today no computer system, not a single computer system that can just take in any sort of stream of data right? Whether it's visual, sound, just normal numerical data or whatever, and just be able to immediately start recognizing entities inside it without having told beforehand what entity is. And the reason for that is we don't have the most general formula of what a thing even is. Or we have the formula in our head in the sense that we know how to implement it, but we don't know how it works. So we don't know how to implement it in our machines, right? So that's the key thing, is that we humans, Allah says that we have been given this intellectual ability, this incredible knowledge and understanding to understand the cosmos and manipulate it. And that's that defines who we are.
Okay, so now turning our attention to the very origin of the universe, many atheists and philosophers propose a pure blind idea of Big Bang or
Sure.
मतलब
Absolutely. They say that there is no intelligence behind it. That's the main idea.
What does Quran say about this?
Absolutely. There is many ways to look at it, but inshallah, let's start with the very term that you said, Big Bang, right? So before, inshallah, for the benefit of everyone, I'll first explain what the Big Bang in short is, right? So essentially, Stephen Hawking was someone who came up with this idea, I think, initially. In fact, I remember I was watching a documentary about it a couple of days ago about how he came up with the idea. But the idea is that the universe seems to be expanding really fast. And it has been expanding at an accelerated rate throughout time, which means that the speed of expansion itself is increasing at all times. The Hubble Space Telescope was the first one to observe this. And what it basically observed is that all the things, firstly, are moving apart, away from each other, which means you measure the distance between them today, then you measure the distance between them a few days later. It always invariably is more, not less, essentially. Of course, not always, but overall, the distance is always increasing. Two galaxies always moving apart. Okay. The other thing they observed is the farther they are, the faster they're moving apart. Okay. So now what Stephen Hawking did was essentially flip the clock, right? He said, well, what if time was going backwards? What would that picture look like? So that's natural. If everything is expanding now, everything will start contracting in the backwards. And if you take that to its logical conclusion, you reach a point where everything in the universe was eventually in one place. And then from there, it expanded, and that's what we call the Big Bang. Some things that people often don't realize about this is that there was a lot of temperature, very high pressures, extremely unstable environment at that time. And so a lot of people named this Big Bang. Part of the reason was also that it's a bang, as in it's an uncontrolled explosion. That's the idea that comes into the mind, right? When you hear Big Bang. Big, obviously, because it covers the whole universe. But let's see how the Quran describes this, right? In Surah Rehman, verse 7, Allah says, As-sama rafa'aha wa wada al-mizan. And the heaven he raised. Now, this first part, the heaven he raised, as-sama rafa'aha, that's obvious. That goes exactly in line with the Big Bang. Everything we see is expanding, the heaven is raising. But then it goes on to say, As-sama rafa'aha wa wada al-mizan, and impose the balance. There is a reason why the rising of the heaven and the imposing of the balance is mentioned in the same verse. We should take that into account, right? There's an and, but the point is, a verse in the Quran, you have to always understand, is a unit of knowledge, is complete in itself for the most part. It gives a complete information, right? And there is a reason why those things are together to make it a complete information, which is to say that only saying that the heaven is rising or expanding is probably not a good enough description. You need to, which is why Allah says together, is that he imposed a balance. Now let's talk about the balance really quickly, if you don't mind. In this very early universe that I just described, the temperatures and the pressures were so high that even atoms, quarks, anything like that was not stable, right? If a hydrogen atom, right, is a proton and an electron, essentially, we imagine it circling around the proton. Obviously, that's not the story. I don't want to go into that today. That's a whole quantum mechanics, inshallah, maybe a different podcast later. But the point is, that proton and the electron circling around it, has some structure, that system, right? If the electron moves too far away or if they get out of sync, that's not an atom anymore, right? So in that early universe, atoms were not possible. The temperature and the pressures were too high. And if we look at charge symmetry, the law of charge symmetry says that in that early universe, out of that very initial quark-gluon plasma, that superheated, almost immaterial structure, two types of you can say entities should have been formed: matter and its antimatter co-part. See, because charge parity means that the total charge in the universe is zero, in the sense as much positive charge as much negative charge equal there is. And so to maintain that balance, in fact, this came out, I believe Pauli came out this, I'm trying to remember. But the idea is that because of this charge parity, exactly equal amount of matter and antimatter particles should have been formed. Because for every matter particle, its antimatter counterpart has everything same except the charge is opposite. So it balances the charge in the universe as a whole, if that makes sense, right? Now, if exactly the same amount of matter and antimatter had been formed, remember we are talking about Bawada al-Mizan, as in the imposing of the balance. Remember that phrase and then think about what I'm saying here, right? So the idea is exactly equal amounts of matter and antimatter, if they were formed that way, they would both collide. And what happens when antimatter and matter collide? Do you know? Annihilation, essentially. Yes, annihilation, which means that there is nothing left after that. As in, when we say nothing, obviously not nothing, only energy is left, only light is left, essentially. So the entire mass and all of that is gone, all of those properties is gone, there's just energy left. If that had been the case, we would not be here today. But what really happened is that for every billion antimatter particle, 1 billion plus 1 matter particle was formed in a very, very specific balance. By the way, if this balance had been any different, would have been a very, very different story. Of course, it could have been perfectly balanced, then nothing will exist today. But the point is, it was precisely 1 billion plus 1 matter particles, and we, me and you and this room and everything in this universe is that billionth plus 1 matter particle, right? And so the phrasing of the heaven was 100% combined with a very, very controlled and sort of set of rules that were preset and under which the expansion must happen. So, as-sama rafa'aha or the.
So, moving to the next question, my question is, what is Fermi paradox? No, I think there is a series on this. Okay, what is Fermi paradox? And in this, I have second question. So, what does what does final revelation tell us about the aliens? Sure, what do you think about that? Do aliens really exist or not?
Yes. You want the short answer? 100% Gebu. Okay. Now you give the long answer. And by the way, yes, Fermi paradox maybe does not have a movie after it, but has a lot of, it has attracted a lot of attention from, for example, sci-fi writers and shows. And I'm sure this is an idea that has been discussed endlessly, right?
Yeah.
Every few years you will have what is the next best alien movie, right? So there's always this idea that has pretty much universally caused us curiosity as human civilization, right? Is there something out there? That always is a question. And now let's come to the Fermi paradox then, right? So the idea of the Fermi paradox is very simple. Now, Fermi, he was this very famous physicist, right? Once he sat down, he was trying to do some math, some probabilistic math. And the idea is he was trying to use probability and statistics to try to predict what is the probability that there should be life on a particular planet, essentially, right? And you can then extend that to try to predict how many of the planets in the galaxy, for example, or in our local cluster should have life on them, right? Obviously, he was coming from this atheistic evolutionary kind of standpoint, and so he asked this question: if life can originate essentially spontaneously without any intervention, any designing. They hate that word if I like saying it. I'm sorry, right? Okay, so that without any design, if life can just come about on a planet, and we see out there are trillions and trillions of galaxies, and then in each billions and billions of stars, and each star having the potential to have 5, 10, 20, you know, planets. Each planet potentially could be having bunch of moons and asteroids. Earth, there is no issue with we don't have enough earth, remember. So if there is so much earth, and if earth can spontaneously give life, then where is now coming paradox? Essentially, if you say it in 3 words, it is where are all the aliens? Like his math is telling him that the sky should be filled with alien spaceships, just like you see in Men in Black. But that's not the case. That's why the paradox, because the math says, they should be there. And essentially the calculation and the observation, right, shows differently. Obviously, there has not been any something like a documented fighting of aliens. That has not happened yet, right? There's a lot of talk. Now let's come to answer why I said so quickly. Yeah, absolutely, there are aliens, right? How am I so confident? So for this, again, I will use Revelation as a way to guide, inshallah. For this, I'll go to Surah Al-Kahf. And we'll be talking about mainly 2 verses, but this is a longer story. I don't want to go too deep into the story, but I'll set the context just a little bit. And in Surah Al-Kahf, there are many different stories, each having their own miraculous natures associated with it. Something to know, all of the stories in Surah Al-Kahf have a miraculous side to it. One of those stories is Zulkarnain alayhi salam's story. Zulkarnain alayhi salam has been shown as Allah gave him the way to all places, and then he carried out at least 3 journeys that have been described in the Quran, right? And so from there we are going here, right? So one of the places where he reached, this is how it is described, right? Until when he reached the setting place of the sun. Now the first thing to note here, firstly, I'll kind of try to prove this by contradiction. Okay. So we are going to both will accept, let's begin with this presumption. Every story in the Quran happened on the earth. Let's accept that. Especially involving people, because people are only on earth, there are no aliens. Let's make that assumption, right? There are no aliens. All the stories involving people must be happening on earth, right? And of people from earth, right? Okay, sure. So now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is describing some place, right? Where again Zulkarnain went, and it was on earth. Okay. Until when he reached the setting place of the sun. Now you tell me which place on the earth you're going to point out by saying, hey, you want to meet at 4 p.m? Let's meet where the sun rises or where the sun sets. You'll be like, what do you mean? It sets here, or if I keep standing, the sun will set here only at some point. If I'm somewhere else, it will set there also at some point. So this is no way to point a place on earth itself. So that's my first key. And that's the first kind of clue almost, right? Then it says so he reached the setting place of the sun, and he found it setting in a spring of dark mud. Now, I don't want to go into what this exactly means, because that would be a podcast in itself. But so far, I'm just giving you the hints as to why that initial assumption that this is happening on earth we have to bring that into question. Because it then says, and he found near it a community. Okay. So the point is, he's reaching a setting place of the sun, and he's finding it setting in a pool of dark mud. Again, because this place could, it makes no sense that this place is on earth, because it is being used, setting of the sun is being used to point out the place. Let's think a little logically, come out of this and think about what we know about the universe today. What is, if we take it literally enough, what does the setting of the sun even mean? Because, when the sun sets in our daily lives, it's actually a metaphorical use of the word setting. Setting means death, essentially. So if the sun is actually setting, what if the sun is actually setting? Where does that happen?
There will be no tomorrow.
There will be no tomorrow, that's true. But what happens? How does the sun actually set normally? Stephen Hawking actually explained this, and some other people also have.
Okay, when the sun dies.
Yes. And what happens oftentimes when the star dies?
It becomes black hole.
Yes, if it is big enough and heavy enough, it can turn into a black hole. And the interesting thing is here, the sun was found setting in a pool of dark mud. Firstly, this does not look a lot like a place on earth, right? If we take it literally enough, this sounds a lot like dark mud. Okay. If we pay attention to this term, dark mud, hamiyapin. What is dark? What is by definition dark?
Black.
Black. Exactly. And if the sun is, what is a dark thing that the sun sets into where the setting is also a real setting?
Black hole.
Yes. So the point is, I believe that this is happening near a black hole where there is a people and they have a sun and it's going into a black hole, and this is essentially an existential crisis. Now let's move on to the next one, because this will strengthen my argument a little further. You might be thinking maybe that's not strong enough. But then he goes to another place, and he says, until then he reached the rising place of the sun. Once again, rising of the sun is also, what happens all over the earth. So again, not really a way to tell.
It is also metaphor.
Yes, I mean, this is the amazing thing about this term rising and setting, is that we use it a lot and we use it in a metaphorical way only 99% of the time. Because we're talking about our own sun. And it doesn't actually set, and it doesn't actually, so to say, rise. It just keeps going, right? So, so he reached the rising place of the sun. Okay, so much. Again, there is that problem. Why rising? How can that point out a place on earth? And then he found it rising on a community. Again, यहाँ पे community है, तो ये तो हो गया कि there is some people here. And we had not made for them against it any shelter. It kya hai? What is the it here? We had not made against it any shelter. And he had reached the rising place of the sun. So obviously the it here is the sun. Okay. The point is, he reached the people. The sun is rising. It's rising upon a people for whom there was no protection against it. So obviously against the sun. Okay. So what place on earth does not have protection against the sun?
I don't think there is any place like this.
Exactly. Because on earth, there has always been an atmosphere for billions of years. And the atmosphere is a primary protector of us against our sun. So, if we keep trying to stick to the initial argument that all of this is happening on earth, then you're going to have to come and explain to me what part of the world did not have atmosphere when. Right? I think it's easier to accept that it's literal. The sun is actually rising. Again, suns are born.
Different to dimension or different by it.
Do you know how suns are born? They are also born out of black holes only. Yes. There is a supermassive black hole at the center of the Milky Way galaxy. And there is a supermassive black hole at the center of almost every galaxy. And it is the star manufacturing machine of the galaxy, actually.
You mean black hole is the star manufacturing machine and its death also?
Yes, it is the entire life cycle of the machine. Yes.
Okay.
Sir, in a few hours, you will realize that it's far beyond that even. Okay. But yes. So the point is, in one place it is rising, in one place it is dying. Both happens with the same thing, which is through black holes. And that in that case, again, if this sun is rising and the people are... the other thing to note here, I'm going a little bit off topic, is that in one place the sun is rising, in one place the sun is setting, in real, which means that a new sun is being born and the old sun is dying. If our sun is dying, going into a black hole, we are probably praying our own janaza, right? The same time, by the way, I don't know how much you realize this, but in the same way, if our sun kind of floats into our solar system from somewhere outside, that's also our janaza. Because we have protection against the first sun, it's very precise. There is a certain amount of atmosphere. There's a certain amount of sunlight already coming in. Certain number of people already getting skin cancer. And we have one more sun. Everyone has skin cancer in 2 months. Okay. So a rising of a new sun and the dying of the current sun are both existential crises. And the third one, I think, is more famous story about Yajuj and Majuj. There it is even more clear that those people were having an existential crisis. So I believe that through these stories, the Quran Islam is going to three different groups of people who are facing cosmological existential crises.
Okay.
Yes.
So you mean Yajuj and Majuj are the aliens?
They are also somewhere else. These people whose sun was dying, they are also not on earth. They were somewhere else at that time, at least. I don't know if they died out or if they're still there. And similarly, for the third group also, they were not on earth, at least at that time. Before you.
Okay, now general relativity is the very famous theory presented by the Einstein, the world famous scientist.
Yes.
And it opens a new gate for a problem called three body problem. There is a show on Netflix on this. And do you think does our final revelation with the Quran has something about this to say?
Absolutely. The Quran has something to say about everything important. Probably everything, if you're smart enough to figure it out, inshallah. So yes, to answer this question, I will go to Surah Ar-Rahman, but before I do that, let me just unpack the question itself a little bit more for our audience. The first thing is relativity. So yes, this was a theory of gravity. It was given by Albert Einstein. 1915, 1920, around that time. And the theory essentially describes how different objects influence each other or get influenced by each other's presence in terms of gravity, right? Okay. Now, one of the things that comes out of his equations essentially is the three body problem, like you said. The three body problem is very highly discussed because it's something that kind of reminds humans of their limitations quite a bit, right? This is a very important problem in that sense. So let me go into that a little bit, right? And I want to kind of be able to have the people watching, inshallah, be able to imagine this and almost be able to intuitively know what I'm saying, right? Because a lot of the times we know something, we just don't know how we know it, in a sense. I have observed that, right? And especially, theoretical physics is something which the lab of the theoretical physicist is his brain, and everyone has a good enough brain, I believe, to be a theoretical physicist, in the sense that a person can imagine a situation and then their brain kind of else then what happens given certain situation. So let me put forward a simple thought experiment. This is what physicists like us do. So the thought experiment is this: imagine a completely blank, dark universe, and there is nothing there. It's just you, and that's it. Okay, you will observe nothing whatsoever. Okay, now let's start updating this slowly. Let's place one thing in this. Let's say a large planet, right, into this universe. What happens now? Well, if there is truly just a planet and nothing else, right, then it will just stay where it is, right? Or if we put it in a motion, it will just probably just keep moving. But actually, you won't even recognize it's moving as much, right? Okay. Now, if you bring in one more thing, now gravity comes into picture, right? These two things will attract each other. Now, let's run that thought experiment in your head. Two things coming from one coming from some random direction outside, one coming from some random direction outside, and they're going to come close. That's all we know, but we don't know exactly which direction. What do you think eventually will happen to these things, right? They will attract each other. We know that much. Newton was not that wrong. He was right that things do seem to attract each other. They'll attract each other. And what will happen? Eventually, they'll spin like this again. Sorry about that. Around each other, right? That fits in almost every person's head, I think. That just makes sense, and no other picture even comes in your mind. That's what I mean by a theoretical physicist can just do the physics in his head. Now bring in a third thing. Now tell me what is the obvious thing that will happen. Can you think of something? what do you think will happen? Two things are spinning with each other now. And this third thing is kind of flowing, slowly drifting towards them, right?
It will disrupt them.
Oh, yes. The word that came out of your head was disrupt. Disrupt is fundamentally unpredictable. The point is, your brain told you, I don't know. So you said disrupt. Your brain is so right, you don't even realize it. Like I said, people are far smarter than they give themselves credit for, right? So it's actually true. The point is, the three-body problem, now coming back to it, essentially proves that if you have three bodies and they're influencing each other's gravity, essentially, like each of them is tugging at the other two, then the mathematics of it essentially plays out in such a way, and the equations play out in such a way that there is actually no possible way to come up with an analytical solution. And when we say analytical solution, all it means is to come up with a solution that works in all circumstances. Okay? You cannot, like, there's not even possibility to give a formula that predicts what will happen for these three bodies. And the main reason for this is that very, very small differences in the very initial setup, like the third thing was it 1 meter away or 1.0001 meter away? Those small differences cause a huge change in the outcome in a very short amount of time, right? And since there's always a limitation on how accurately you can know what's happening at a given time, and due to this mathematical nature of these three bodies, it's impossible to tell what will happen. Now let's go to the Quran. I gave such a long explanation. Let's see how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does it. He does it in just 2 or 3 words actually, right? Surah Rehman verse 5. Ash-shamsu wal qamaru bihusban. 3 words, मुश्किल से 4 words. Okay, let's understand what this means. The sun and the moon move by precise calculation. What we have just learned is that
it is not possible to predict their back rays.
Absolutely, you've got it. So there is a sun, there is a moon. Well, and you are on earth. So there's always the earth. So this is 3 bodies.
3 bodies, exactly.
And we know from mathematics, we cannot, because we write those equations. It is our equations that we cannot solve, right? But we know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not need to solve any equations. He knows everything beforehand. So he says, Ash-shamsu wal amru bihusban. By precise movement, the sun and the moon move. Why to say by precise movement only? Any word could have been there, but it says precise. There is a very special reason for this. Is because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knew well that one day humanity will recognize that it is actually impossible for these things to move in a particular way and like to be able to predict how they will move. And so I will mention it beforehand that I do it with precision, right?
You can't do it, but
You can't do it. I can do it, and I will write it also that I have done it beforehand, right? So the fail and the call are completely in line, and the Paul comes way before anyone got to those equations, right? The other thing, and this is something to really ponder upon. By the way, you said they could get disrupted, right? This is true. The moon could have fallen into the earth. The moon could have fallen into the sun. The earth could have fallen into the sun. A collision could have happened. The moon could have flown away. The earth could have been knocked out of the solar system also. All of these possibilities are 100% there, and no one can make sure that that does not happen. And yet it did not happen for billions of years. And then the creator of those things is saying, I'm doing it with precise calculations. And the creation knows that that precise calculation is not possible by the best supercomputers we have. Now you go bigger. I will not. I will leave it there.
Okay, now from moving to the general relativity, we are going to the quantum world, small.
Let's go to the small.
And I'm talking about the very special particle, which is neutrinos. So do you have any explanation about neutrinos, which is mentioned in the Quran, and what is neutrinos according to the modern science?
Absolutely. Neutrinos are amazing. And yes, of course, the Quran speaks about them as well. Let me go into the neutrinos just a little bit. I want to do this one slightly differently, in a slightly different way. I'm going to tell you, kind of read out, but just share with you a conversation I had with ChatGPT. Okay. And then we'll take it from there, inshallah. So there's a question I asked, right? Tell me, what fundamental particle regularly passes through the earth? And something which comes from outside and then goes right through and then leaves. Just out of curiosity, I asked this question. And immediately ChatGPT says, that would be the neutrino. It is super light. It's a fundamental particle. It almost does not interact with anything at all, which is why. And also the thing is, mostly a lot of the neutrinos actually originate from the Big Bang. They were created at that time. A lot of the neutrinos are created in supernovae when these stars kind of explode. Galaxies and colliding, any of these very high pressure, high temperature type of environments. And, even in the stars all the time, the neutrinos are being created and they leave the star. Now they're so light. Like just think about something being light and then make it even lighter and then keep going down that path of something being lighter and lighter and lighter. What happens? Like physically, when you're trying to, let's say, trying to catch something which is so light, what happens? No, but it's hard to even capture, right? Like the idea is, if something is so light, your hand moves towards it and it flies away just from the breath, from the air. You see what I mean? Like it's just something. If something is so light, it will like fly away like very easily, very hard to kind of control in one place. And yes, the other thing is it will not interact with anything at all, right? Because so light, it does not have much of gravitational force. It does not have charge either. It's a neutrino, so it doesn't have any charge. So because it's so light from the mass point of view, the gravity part doesn't affect it too much. And because it has no charge, in fact, the charge part does not affect it either. And so basically what happens to these neutrinos, they just keep going straight. They just keep going. Some of them have been traveling for 13 billion years and have never...
So they are 13 billion years old.
Absolutely they are. Yes, some of them have had the same structure for 13 billion years and they have just gone, right?
So what is their work?
Yeah, we'll come to that. Let me just tell you the next question I asked, right? In terms of cosmology, what is the significance of the neutrino? When ChatGPT said this is the neutrino you're talking about, I just asked really quickly, what is the significance of the neutrino? And it says the neutrinos, you asked the question also, what does it do, so to say, right? And this is what it says. In terms of cosmology, since we are on the topic, they are the quiet witnesses of the universe. Chup-chap sab observe karne wale. They sit there and watch. Why?
Like a spies.
Like spies. But they're very different types of spies in the sense that the reason they watch everything,
They watch everything and they don't tell anybody of this.
Yes, that's a very good point actually, because they just pass by. They don't interact with anything else to pass on the information of what
They carry information without telling anybody about this.
Absolutely. In fact, if they did, they would not be able to carry all that information in a sense, right? So the point is, even like observing things affects the observer and the observed, right? And so it always affects. So there is so little interaction in every shape or form. With all the matter aspect, the neutrinos almost don't interact with anything. But with the light aspect of things, it can get interacted. Okay. So, but even in that case, it is so light that there is almost no influence, right? And even with light, because it's neutral, the electromagnetic and the magnetic waves don't affect. Now let's come back to the Quran, right? I'm going to go to Surah Al-Hadid, right? It is He who created the heavens and the earth in 6 days, and He established Himself upon the throne. Who are we talking about?
It is Allah.
Absolutely. That is a creator. Now, He knows what penetrates into the earth. The what here? What penetrates into the earth?
To the earth.
That's something else. right? It is something that about which Allah is talking about, right? Okay. So let's pay attention to this.
There is a thing which penetrates
Yes.
straight into the earth.
Yes. So that's what actually brought in that question, ChatGPT. I'm going in reverse order in a sense, but let's just read through the description of what it means, right? So it penetrates into the earth. He knows what penetrates into the earth and what emerges from it. Again, earth. Don't think of it as earth. It's ard. So penetrate into the lands and emerges from it. It's something to pay attention to, right? Because for the most part, one can imagine something coming from outer space, but it should stop here, right? Why should it? How can it go through something 5,000 kilometers in diameter and it is just passing by like that, right? So that's something special, right? Something not common, right? So it's something that penetrates into the earth and emerges from it, has to go through and through. What descends from the heaven and ascends therein, which is the same thing said in a different way, right? Descends from the heavens. Heavens here again, not heaven, right? Samawat. And the skies. I think the skies is a better word, or the cosmos. I don't know. Maybe English just doesn't have the right word for sama. So the point is, yes, it comes from outside and then again goes back out, right? But the point is, does not flip back, goes through and through, right? Is what we are talking about, because it says penetrates into the earth and emerges from it. So that means when it comes in, it doesn't change direction, keeps going, right? When I read this, that's when I asked ChatGPT, hey, what is something that penetrates? And it went straight to the neutrino. Now, you could say that's like guesswork, almost. Sure. But I'll give you another piece proof within that will show no way. Because the second question that I asked ChatGPT was, what is the significance of the neutrino? And it says it's the quiet witness. And it has been everywhere and it has seen everything. That's what ChatGPT said. Of course, it's being a little hyperbolical. It has not been everywhere and seen everything. That's only the creator. But the point is, out of all creation, if there is something which has been everywhere and seen everything, closest to that, that's the neutrino. That's what modern science tells us. Now let's read on the verse and see what Allah says about himself after this. Allah says, He is with you wherever you are, and Allah of what you do is seeing. Now, of course, He is with us wherever we are and He sees everything. But why to give that only description like of Himself after describing a fundamental particle that does something very similar to that? That shows that the neutrino is being talked about here. So yes, to answer your question, neutrino is very much mentioned here. And I'm sure as we keep learning more about
So neutrino carry our information
yes,
from here to there,
to where?
the throne of Allah.
No, I don't think so. I think so. Not needed, right? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is already everywhere. So one of the descriptions, it's an interesting point. One of the descriptions that I have even seen in the Bible, I think. See, not everything we can take as the word, but some things are very much in line with with the Quran. So this term, beyond an unapproachable light. It says God is beyond an unapproachable light. So my understanding of that is that the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sees everything has nothing to do with anything we can observe here. We can only see like things that get close to any of his sifat, but never actually there, right? That's the point. And it's not even a part of that mechanism, I don't think, right? So he does not need even a mechanism, right? To observe everything. Just sees everything all the time, at all times. Even the things that did not happen knows, could have happened, could not happen, right? There's possibilities, impossibilities, hypotheticals within impossibilities, all of them, right? So that's a completely different level. But the neutrinos, all I'm saying here is that the description of the neutrino and then that sifat of the creator, it goes in line in the sense that the neutrino is a very good you can think of it. I think this is that's way to look at it. If someone can create something like the neutrino, which is almost everywhere and sees almost everything, then the creator must actually be everywhere and know everything. That's how, like, how much further, like, you see, the creator must be. He created something which is almost everywhere and sees everything. That's how I would see the neutrino.
But there is a different school of thought which say Allah is not everywhere. He's on his throne.
That is also true in, no, but Allah says he's closer to and closer to you than the jugular vein, right?
Yes.
So we have to take that one literally. I mean, he is.
Okay.
So I think both are true, is what I would say, right? That
There is nothing impossible for it.
yes, absolutely. And I am really uncomfortable pointing a location to the create, like a singular location is what I mean. The best way to say is just is everywhere, however fits his majesty. We should maybe add that part always at the end. But the point is, I don't think there is I don't think one can ever say is there, or, like, because you can never limit in any way, shape, or form, right? So that's but if he says I'm upon the throne, then he is upon the throne, right? But doesn't mean somehow or here. That's the point, right?
So this is not just the end. These are the only facts about the cosmology and the Quran, and we will continue this series, inshallah. So stay tuned with us.